Welcome to today's episode of absolute mind-blowing revelations from our prehistoric past. Picture this. You re-hiking through the forests of Ice Age Europe, 50,000 years ago, when you suddenly come face to face with a being that looks almost human, but not quite. Standing before you is a creature with shoulders broader than any bodybuilder, arms that could crush bones like twigs, and a brain actually larger than yours. Their eyes burn with intelligence as they grip a spear tipped with perfectly crafted stone. And behind them, cave walls glow with red paintings they created in the flickering firelight. This isn't some fantasy creature from a movie. This was a Neanderthal, and everything you think you know about them is probably wrong. For over a century, we've painted Neanderthals as brutish cavemen, knuckle-dragging primitives who represented everything we evolved beyond. We called them stupid, savage, and doomed to fail. But recent discoveries have shattered this image so completely that some scientists now argue they weren't even a separate species. They were just us, living in a different time and place. The real Neanderthals were absolute freaks of nature in the best possible way. They were living tanks with brains to match artistic geniuses who created the world's oldest known cave paintings, master craftsmen who made glue and rope 100 years before we figured out agriculture, and survivors who thrived in conditions that would kill modern humans in days. They hunted woolly mammoths with their bare hands, cared for disabled family members with compassion that rivals our own, and carried genes so valuable that we still carry them today. These weren't our inferior predecessors. They were our equals, our lovers, and in some ways, our superiors. So buckle up, because we're about to dive deep into the extraordinary world of the Neanderthals and discover why these freaks of nature might have been the most remarkable humans who ever lived. Chapter 1. The ultimate human predators. Imagine walking into a gym and seeing someone bench press 400 pounds with ease, their muscles rippling under skin that seems built for battle. Now imagine the person has been doing this kind of workout their entire life, not for sport, but for survival. Welcome to the world of Neanderthal fitness. Neanderthals weren't just strong. They were absolutely jacked in ways that would make modern athletes weep with envy. These weren't your average prehistoric humans stumbling around with sticks. They were living, breathing powerhouses with upper body strength that probably surpassed that of any human population alive today. Their shoulder and elbow leverage was optimized for generating massive force, turning them into biological machines designed for one thing: bringing down prey that could easily kill them. Standing between 5 to 5.7 feet tall and weighing 140 to 180 pounds, Neanderthals packed incredible muscle mass onto their compact frames. But this wasn't just any muscle. This was functional, survival-hardened strength built through a lifetime of close combat hunting that would terrify modern humans. Picture the difference between a bodybuilder's show muscles and a construction worker's practical strength. Then multiply that by 10. Upper body strength was absolutely critical to their hunting success because Neanderthals employed close-range hunting strategies with hand-delivered weapons. Greater strength didn't just help them survive. It increased the diversity of prey species they could hunt. While early modern humans were developing long-range projectile weapons, Neanderthals were perfecting the art of getting close enough to a mammoth to kill it with a thrusting spear. Think about that for a moment. These people looked at a woolly mammoth, a creature the size of a modern elephant with tusks like telephone poles, and thought, "I'm going to walk up to that thing and stab it." And they succeeded, regularly. The evidence is written in their bones. Neanderthal skeletons show trauma patterns that are remarkably similar to those of modern rodeo riders, people who regularly get trampled by large, angry animals. About 80% of Neanderthal remains show evidence of major traumatic injuries, with many showing signs of bear attacks, big cat encounters, and wolf confrontations. But here's the kicker: they survived these injuries. We find Neanderthal bones that show extensive healing from breaks, cuts, and puncture wounds. One extreme example is Shanadar, who survived an amputation of the right arm, bone infections, vision problems, possible hearing loss, and an abnormal gait, and lived to old age. This wasn't just toughness. This was a level of resilience that speaks to incredible group care and medical knowledge. Their bodies were perfectly designed for their hunting style. Neanderthals had shorter legs than modern humans, particularly in the lower leg bones, which made them less suited for long-distance running, but perfect for explosive sprints and powerful bursts of speed. They were built like biological sports cars, not for marathon endurance, but for incredible acceleration and raw power. Modern research has shown that sprinters tend to have shorter lower legs and longer toes than distance runners. And guess what? Neanderthals had both these features. Their longer toes allowed their feet to stay in contact with the ground longer, creating more powerful push-offs, while their shorter legs generated more accelerating force. They weren't just hunting small game, either. Neanderthal sites contain the remains of reindeer, horses, aurochs, steppe bison, and even evidence of regular straight-tusked elephant hunting. At one German site, archaeologists found evidence that Neanderthals were taking down elephants every 5 to 6 years like clockwork. Imagine organizing your entire community around regularly hunting creatures that weigh several tons. But perhaps most impressively, stone tools found at Neanderthal sites often bear impact scars on their tips, evidence that they were using stone-tipped spears in close combat. These weren't throwing weapons for long-distance kills. They were thrusting spears designed for face-to-face encounters with megafauna. The anatomy tells the story. Left-right arm asymmetry in Neanderthal bones indicates they were using thrusting spears rather than throwing weapons. This means they regularly got close enough to dangerous animals to stab them while looking them in the eye. Try to imagine the courage, skill, and sheer physical capability required to repeatedly execute this hunting strategy. While modern humans were developing endurance-based hunting strategies suited to open African plains, Neanderthals were perfecting power and strength-based approaches perfect for the dense forests of Ice Age Europe. They were adapted for explosive ambush hunting rather than persistence hunting. This wasn't just about individual strength. It was about a completely different approach to survival. Where our ancestors learned to outlast their prey, Neanderthals learned to overpower it. They looked at the most dangerous creatures in their environment and decided the best strategy was to get close enough to wrestle them to death. And incredibly, this strategy worked for over 400,000 years. These were unfailed experiments in human evolution. They were perfectly adapted super predators who dominated their environment through a combination of intelligence, technology, and raw physical power that we can barely comprehend today. The Neanderthals weren't just survivors. They were apex predators who could take on any creature in their environment and win. They were the ultimate human predators, and their legacy is written in the bones of the megafauna they conquered. Chapter 2. Bigger Brains. Here is a fact that will blow your mind. The average Neanderthal had a larger brain than you do. Neanderthal brain volume averaged 1,640 cubic centimeters for males and 1,460 cubic centimeters for females, larger than any living human population today. To put that in perspective, the modern human average is around 1,400 cubic centimeters. Albert Einstein's brain was 1,230 cubic centimeters. But size isn't everything, right? Well, when it comes to Neanderthal intelligence, size was just the beginning of their neurological superpowers. Recent research suggests that Neanderthals had proportionally larger visual processing areas in their brains, particularly in the occipital and parietal regions. This wasn't just bigger brains. This was specialized brain architecture that may have given them visual processing abilities that bordered on superhuman. Think about what this means. Neanderthals may have been able to perceive raw visual information in incredible detail without the top-down processing that modern human brains typically use. Where we see patterns and make assumptions, they might have seen every individual detail with crystal clarity. It is like the difference between looking at a photo on your phone and examining it with a high-powered microscope. Genetically, Neanderthals had substitutions in opsin genes that could have influenced their color vision, and some research suggests they may have been better adapted for low-light conditions. This fits perfectly with their northern latitude lifestyle, where winter days were short and hunting might have required excellent night vision. But their mental capabilities went far beyond just seeing better. These were the world's first engineers, and the evidence is staggering. As recently as 2024, archaeologists discovered that Neanderthals were operating what can only be described as ancient glue factories, sophisticated hearths heated to precise temperatures of 300 degrees Fahrenheit to produce sticky tar from plant resins. This wasn't accidental. This was controlled chemical engineering that required understanding temperature control, material properties, and manufacturing processes. They created stone tools held together by multi-component adhesives, the earliest evidence of complex adhesive technology in Europe. These weren't simple tools either. They were sophisticated implements that showcased technical solutions broadly similar to examples made by early modern humans in Africa, but with a Neanderthal spin. Neanderthals invented rope. Bits of twisted wood fiber found in France prove they understood cordage technology, which opened the door to fashioning clothes, bags, and mats. Try making rope from scratch sometime. It requires understanding tension, fiber strength, and complex manual dexterity. But perhaps most mind-blowing is what happened in Bremiquel Cave in southern France. Deep inside this cave, in areas where no natural light could penetrate, Neanderthals arranged hundreds of broken stalagmites into large ellipsoid structures and several smaller stacks. No one knows what these structures were for, but they suggest creativity and possibly even symbolic thinking on a scale we never imagined. This wasn't random activity. Neanderthals had to bring light sources into pitch-black cave areas, deliberately collect, and place hundreds of cave formations in specific patterns, and maintain fires that reddened and blackened many of the structures. This demonstrates complex spatial organization, long-term planning, and possibly ritual behavior. The artistic evidence is equally compelling. Cave paintings in Spain dated to 65,000 years ago, made 20,000 years before modern humans arrived in Europe, show red horizontal and vertical lines forming ladder-like patterns, hand stencils, and geometric designs. These paintings were created in carefully selected locations, ceilings of low overhangs and impressive stalagmite formations that must have held special meaning. The hand stencils are particularly significant because creating them required deliberate preparation, bringing light sources and pigments into pitch-black areas, applying pigment to hands, and placing them on walls in meaningful locations. This wasn't accidental art. This was intentional symbolic expression. Even more impressive is a 51,000-year-old engraved deer bone found in Germany's Unicorn Cave. The bone shows several large grooves carved at precise angles, creating a prominent chevron-like pattern. The bone came from a giant deer that lived much farther north, meaning Neanderthals either traveled vast distances to obtain it or maintained long-distance trade networks. But their intelligence wasn't just technical, it was deeply social and emotional. In 2024, researchers identified a 6-year-old Neanderthal child, nicknamed Tina, who had Down syndrome and severe hearing loss. The fact that she survived to age 6 in a harsh Ice Age environment proves that her community cared for her out of pure altruism, showing emotional intelligence and social cooperation that rivals our own. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, Neanderthals repeatedly returned to lay their dead to rest in what appears to be a formal cemetery. A 75,000-year-old female Neanderthal discovered there had been carefully buried, suggesting death rituals and possibly even spiritual beliefs. Their problem-solving abilities were extraordinary. Neanderthals at different sites showed evidence of sophisticated food processing, roasting and smoking meat, using specific plants for flavoring or medicine, roasting pine cones to access pine nuts, and possibly rendering fat from animal bones to offset protein toxicity. This wasn't just eating whatever they could find. This was culinary science. They may have had faster growth rates than modern humans, meaning their large brains developed more quickly. Dental evidence suggests Neanderthal children matured faster than modern human children, possibly giving them cognitive advantages earlier in life. Perhaps most remarkably, some researchers propose that Neanderthals possessed what they call archaic primary consciousness, a type of awareness that included savant-like perception abilities. While modern human brains use top-down processing that filters and categorizes information, Neanderthal brains might have processed raw sensory data with incredible richness and detail. Modern genetic research shows that all non-African populations carry 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. And interestingly, many of these inherited genes are associated with brain development, perception, and cognitive functions. We literally carry pieces of their intelligence in our own minds. The evidence is overwhelming. Neanderthals weren't primitive cavemen stumbling through the Ice Age. They were sophisticated engineers, artists, caregivers, and thinkers whose cognitive abilities not only matched our own, but in some areas may have exceeded them. Their bigger brains weren't just for show. They were powerful biological computers that processed information, solved problems, and created meaning in ways we're only beginning to understand. When we look at Neanderthal intelligence, we're not looking at our primitive ancestors. We're looking at our intellectual equals, and in some cases, our superiors. Chapter 3. The Ice Age. While you're complaining about putting on a winter coat when it hits 40 degrees, Neanderthals were strutting through Ice Age Europe wearing custom-tailored clothing that would make modern outdoor gear companies weep with envy. These were unshivering cavemen wrapped in random animal skins. They were the world's first fashion designers, and their style was literally a matter of life and death. Recent archaeological evidence shows that Neanderthals were likely wearing elaborate clothing, including parkas, pants, and boots. If they were creating these garments 200,000 years ago, they were arguably the world's first fashionistas, developing complex clothing technology millennia before modern humans figured out agriculture. Think about what this means. While early modern humans in Africa were dealing with warm climates where minimal clothing was sufficient, Neanderthals were engineering complete clothing systems to survive in some of the harshest environments humans had ever encountered. They weren't just throwing animal hides over their shoulders. They were creating sophisticated, multi-layer garment systems that kept them alive in conditions that would kill unprotected humans in hours. The evidence is everywhere once you know how to look for it. Stone scrapers show microscopic wear patterns consistent with hide preparation. Bone awls, basically prehistoric sewing needles, show they were punching holes in leather and hide. Most remarkably, archaeologists have even found twisted bits of cord, possibly from shoes or fabric, proving they understood textile construction. But let's talk about the process they used to create these clothes, because it reveals just how sophisticated their textile technology really was. First, a Neanderthal hunter would kill a large animal, let's say a reindeer or aurochs. Then they would use specially designed stone scrapers to clean the hide, removing every bit of fat and tissue in a process that required hours of skilled labor. Next, they would use bone awls to poke holes in the prepared leather, and finally use strips of animal tissue or sinew to lace together loose-fitting but effective garments. This wasn't a simple process. Hide preparation is an art form that requires deep knowledge of animal anatomy, skin chemistry, and material properties. You have to know exactly how to scrape without damaging the hide, how to treat the skin to prevent rotting, and how to work the leather to maintain flexibility in freezing temperatures. But Neanderthals took textile technology even further. They invented rope and cordage, twisting plant fibers into strong, flexible materials that could be used for everything from tool handles to clothing ties to hunting nets. This technology required understanding of fiber strength, tension, and manufacturing processes that wouldn't look out of place in a modern textile mill. Their clothing wasn't just functional, it was fashionable. Neanderthals were using colorful pigments like red ochre as far back as 200,000 to 250,000 years ago, possibly not just on objects but also on their own bodies. They sometimes imported these pigments from tens of kilometers away, showing they valued specific colors enough to travel great distances to obtain them. Painted seashells found in Spanish caves show that Neanderthals were creating body ornaments 115,000 years ago, older than similar ornaments found in Africa and made by early modern humans. These shells were carefully perforated and colored with red and yellow pigments, creating jewelry that served both aesthetic and possibly symbolic purposes. But the real genius of Neanderthal fashion was how perfectly adapted it was to their environment and lifestyle. Their stocky physiques, with shorter limbs and broader torsos, were naturally adapted to conserve body heat. But combined with sophisticated clothing systems, they became virtually unstoppable in cold environments. Neanderthals had proportionally larger noses than modern humans, not for aesthetic reasons, but as biological air conditioning systems. Their huge nasal passages warmed and humidified the cold, dry air of Ice Age Europe before it reached their lungs, preventing the respiratory damage that kills modern humans in extreme cold. Their clothing had to be versatile enough for different activities. Neanderthal hunters needed gear that allowed for explosive sprints during ambush hunting, protection from animal claws and teeth during close combat, and insulation during long winter nights in caves. This required different types of garments for different purposes. Essentially, they were creating the world's first technical outdoor wear. Evidence from multiple Neanderthal sites shows they were sophisticated food processors who understood preservation techniques, meaning their clothing technology was probably integrated with food storage systems. They likely had specialized garments for different activities: hunting clothes, food preparation clothes, ceremonial clothes, and sleeping garments. The seasonal demands were incredible. Neanderthals had to survive temperature swings that could go from summer highs to winter conditions that would challenge modern Arctic explorers. Their clothing systems had to be modular, repairable, and adapted to resource availability throughout the year. But here's where it gets really interesting. Neanderthal fashion wasn't just about survival. It was about identity. The use of specific pigments, carefully crafted ornaments, and intentional decoration suggests that Neanderthals understood fashion as a form of self-expression and group identification. They weren't just wearing clothes. They were wearing statements about who they were and which group they belonged to. Their tools show they were the first humans to regularly sew fitted clothing. While modern humans were still using pins and ties to hold loose garments together, Neanderthals were creating tailored fits using bone needles and sinew thread. This allowed for much better insulation and freedom of movement during physically demanding activities like hunting. The quality of their work was extraordinary. Microscopic analysis of Neanderthal tools shows wear patterns consistent with hours of detailed hide work, suggesting they were creating clothing with the same care and attention to detail that modern craftspeople put into high-end leather goods. And let's talk about maintenance. Neanderthal clothing had to last through multiple seasons in harsh conditions. This meant they developed techniques for cleaning, repairing, and waterproofing their garments using natural materials. They probably knew more about leather treatment and fabric care than most people alive today. Their clothing technology was so advanced that it allowed them to survive in environments that modern humans, even with all our technology, find challenging. Neanderthals were living and thriving in Ice Age Europe while wearing clothes they made entirely by hand from materials they processed themselves. The impact of their fashion innovation can't be overstated. Sophisticated clothing technology allowed Neanderthals to expand their range far beyond what would have been possible for naked or minimally clothed humans. It enabled them to hunt in winter conditions, explore new territories, and maintain active communities throughout the year. When we picture Neanderthals, we shouldn't imagine primitive people in crude animal skins. We should see master craftspeople wearing carefully designed, beautifully decorated, and incredibly functional clothing that represented tens of thousands of years of textile innovation. They weren't just survivors. They were the Ice Age fashion police, setting standards for cold weather gear that we're still trying to match today. Chapter 4. Master Chefs. Forget everything you think you know about caveman cuisine. While you're struggling to grill a burger without burning it, Neanderthals were running sophisticated food operations that would make modern celebrity chefs jealous. These weren't grunting brutes gnawing on raw mammoth. They were culinary innovators who developed cooking techniques, flavor combinations, and food processing methods that were thousands of years ahead of their time. At Cueva del Sidrón in Spain, Neanderthals were roasting and smoking meat using techniques that wouldn't look out of place in a modern barbecue restaurant. But they didn't stop there. They were using specific plants like yarrow and chamomile, possibly for flavoring their food or for their medicinal properties. Think about that. 50,000 years before we invented fine dining, Neanderthals were experimenting with herbs and spices. But the real genius of Neanderthal cuisine wasn't just what they cooked. It was how they thought about food as a complex system of nutrition, preservation, and social organization. At Gorham's Cave in Gibraltar, archaeologists found evidence that Neanderthals were roasting pine cones to access the nutritious pine nuts inside. This wasn't random experimentation. Pine nuts are incredibly rich in protein and healthy fats, and extracting them requires specific knowledge about heating techniques and timing. They had figured out how to turn tree seeds into gourmet snacks. Even more impressively, at Gruta de Figueira Brava, Neanderthals were cooking brown crabs by roasting them to soften the shells before cracking them open. This shows sophisticated understanding of shellfish biology and cooking methods that are still used in coastal cuisines today. Their menu was incredibly diverse and showed remarkable adaptability to local resources. In European sites, prey items included reindeer, horse, aurochs, and steppe bison, while Neanderthals in Southwest Asia hunted mountain gazelle, Persian fallow deer, wild goats, and camels. But they weren't just big game specialists. At Gibraltar sites, archaeologists found butchered remains of 143 different bird species, many ground-dwelling varieties like quail, corncrake, woodlark, and crested lark. Some waterside communities ate fish and shellfish, including dolphin and Mediterranean monk seal. They also hunted small game, with some caves showing evidence of regular rabbit and tortoise consumption. Think about what this means from a culinary perspective. Neanderthals weren't just eating whatever they could catch. They were managing complex seasonal menus that required different hunting techniques, processing methods, and cooking styles for dozens of different species. Food remains preserved in the calculus around Neanderthal teeth show their diet included various plants, either collected directly or from eating the stomach contents of their plant-eating prey. They also ate fungi, showing they understood which wild mushrooms were safe and nutritious. Though perhaps their most impressive culinary achievement was understanding seasonal food management. At Grotte du Lazaret in France, archaeologists found evidence of a single autumn hunting season where Neanderthals took down 23 red deer, 6 ibexes, 3 aurochs, and 1 roe deer. This suggests they were curing and storing massive amounts of meat before winter set in. This wasn't just hoarding food. This was sophisticated food preservation technology. Curing meat requires understanding of salt concentration, humidity control, temperature management, and timing. Get any of these factors wrong, and your entire winter food supply rots, potentially killing your entire group. At Neumark Nord, German Neanderthals may have been rendering fat from animal bones to offset protein toxicity. This shows incredibly sophisticated understanding of nutrition science. They knew that eating too much lean meat could be harmful and developed techniques to balance their macronutrients. Their cooking technology was equally advanced. Neanderthals controlled fire with precision, creating hearths that could maintain specific temperatures for different cooking techniques. But what really sets Neanderthal cuisine apart was their understanding of food as medicine. The plants they used, yarrow and chamomile, have well-documented medicinal properties. Yarrow is a natural antiseptic and digestive aid, while chamomile is anti-inflammatory and helps with sleep. They weren't just flavoring their food. They were practicing culinary medicine. Isotopic analysis of Neanderthal bones shows their average diet consisted of significant amounts of meat, but they clearly understood the importance of plant foods for complete nutrition. They were balancing proteins, fats, carbohydrates, and micronutrients in ways that supported their incredibly active lifestyles. The social aspects of Neanderthal dining were equally sophisticated. Evidence from multiple sites suggests communal cooking and food sharing. Large hearths surrounded by tool-making areas and sleeping spaces show that meal preparation was a central social activity that brought groups together. The discovery of Tina, a 6-year-old Neanderthal child with disabilities who survived to that age, proves that Neanderthal communities shared food and resources with members who couldn't contribute to hunting or gathering. This kind of food sharing demonstrates social values that prioritize community care over individual survival. Their food processing techniques were incredibly advanced. Neanderthals made complex adhesives from birch bark, a process that requires precise temperature control and timing. If they could do this for tool making, they certainly had the technical knowledge to develop sophisticated food preservation techniques using similar principles. Seasonal hunting patterns show they understood animal behavior and migration cycles, allowing them to intercept herds at optimal times when the animals were at their fattest and most nutritious. This required long-term planning and ecological knowledge that goes far beyond simple opportunistic hunting. The variety in their cooking methods was remarkable. Evidence suggests they used techniques including roasting over open fires, smoking in covered pits, steaming in natural hot springs, and possibly even underground cooking using heated stones. Each method would have produced different flavors and textures, showing they understood food not just as fuel, but as something to be enjoyed. At coastal sites like Gibraltar, Neanderthals developed specialized techniques for processing marine resources. They knew how to safely harvest and prepare shellfish, seal meat, and even dolphin, foods that require specific knowledge to avoid poisoning. Their kitchen tools were surprisingly sophisticated. Beyond basic cutting and scraping implements, they had specialized tools for different food processing tasks: bone marrow extractors, nut-cracking stones, hide-scraping tools that doubled as meat processors, and heating stones for cooking in areas without wood for fires. What's most remarkable is that Neanderthal cuisine represents over 400,000 years of culinary evolution. Generation after generation refined techniques, discovered new foods, developed better preservation methods, and created cooking traditions that were passed down through families and communities. When we look at Neanderthal food culture, we're not seeing primitive scavenging. We're seeing the origins of gastronomy itself. They were the world's first master chefs, developing techniques and traditions that laid the foundation for all human cuisine that followed. They didn't just survive the Ice Age, they ate well while doing it. Chapter 5. Love in a Time of Mammoths. This is where the story gets really spicy. For decades, scientists believed that Neanderthals and modern humans were completely separate species who rarely, if ever, interacted. But recent DNA analysis has revealed one of the most epic love stories in human history. a tale of forbidden romance, genetic mixing and biological fusion that literally changed what it means to be human. Modern humans and Neanderthals didn't just meet and mate once. They repeatedly interbred over nearly 250,000 years in what researchers are calling multiple waves of genetic exchange. These weren't isolated encounters. They were sustained periods of intimate contact that reshaped both species genetically. Picture this. You're a modern human explorer pushing into Ice Age Europe 50,000 years ago, and you encounter these stocky, powerful, intelligent beings who've been living there for hundreds of thousands of years. They know every cave, every hunting ground, every seasonal migration pattern. They make better tools than you do, survive in conditions that would kill you, and have mastered technologies you've never seen. What happened next changed human evolution forever. Scientists have identified at least 3 major waves of interbreeding. The first about 200 to 250,000 years ago, another 100 to 120,000 years ago, and the largest wave about 50 to 60,000 years ago. The most recent analysis shows this interbreeding started about 50,500 years ago and lasted roughly 7,000 years until Neanderthals began to disappear. This wasn't casual hookups at the edge of territories. Archaeological evidence shows that Neanderthals and modern humans lived side by side in northern Europe for thousands of years, sharing the same landscapes, competing for the same resources, and ultimately sharing their beds and their genes. The most compelling evidence comes from the Skull Cave in Israel, where archaeologists have found the skeletons of 7 adults and 3 children who were intentionally buried. Each person possessed a different combination of modern human and Neanderthal traits. Physical evidence of ongoing interbreeding that dates back 140,000 years. The first skeleton discovered there belonged to a child between 3 and 5 years old, most likely a girl, whose skull shows both Neanderthal and modern human characteristics. This represents the earliest known example of human-Neanderthal hybridization, pushing back the timeline of our romantic entanglements by tens of thousands of years. But here's what makes this love story even more remarkable. The offspring weren't just surviving, they were thriving. Recent genetic analysis shows that Neanderthal genes weren't random leftovers from ancient hookups. They were actively preserved in human populations because they provided survival advantages. Today, all non-African human populations carry 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA in their genomes. If you're of European, Asian, or Native American descent, you are literally part Neanderthal. Their genes influence everything from your immune system to your hair texture, from your ability to process certain foods to your susceptibility to various diseases. Some of these Neanderthal genes are associated with increased muscle mass and bone density. The biological echoes of their incredible strength still course through our veins. Others affect brain development, perception, and cognitive functions, meaning pieces of their enhanced intelligence live on in our minds. Neanderthal genes influence skin and hair pigmentation, with some variants associated with red hair and pale skin, adaptations that were perfect for the low-light conditions of Northern Europe. If you're a redhead, you're carrying genetic gifts from your Neanderthal ancestors. But the most remarkable Neanderthal genetic legacy affects our immune systems. Many of the Neanderthal genes that survived in modern populations are associated with immune function, particularly the ability to fight off infectious diseases. When modern humans moved into Europe and Asia, they encountered new pathogens their immune systems had never seen. Interbreeding with Neanderthals gave them access to immune system upgrades that had been tested and refined over hundreds of thousands of years of European living. It's like receiving a software update for your antivirus program, except the update came from passionate encounters with the ultimate survivors of Ice Age Europe. The pattern of genetic inheritance tells a fascinating story about the dynamics of these relationships. Analysis shows that the offspring of early Neanderthal-modern human matings often stayed with Neanderthal communities rather than modern human groups, which explains why some early genetic mixing left no trace in living human populations. But as the interactions continued, more and more hybrid offspring integrated into modern human populations, carrying their Neanderthal heritage forward through thousands of generations. Recent discoveries have revealed that these weren't just random encounters. They represent organized cultural exchange. Both groups were using similar tool technologies, creating art, and engaging in complex social behaviors. These were meetings of equals, not conquests of primitives by advanced humans. The genetic evidence suggests that Neanderthal populations were much smaller than previously thought, perhaps only 2,400 breeding individuals at any given time, compared to much larger modern human populations. This meant that when interbreeding occurred, Neanderthal genes had a proportionally larger impact on the hybrid offspring. But the love story has a bittersweet ending. While Neanderthal genes live on in modern humans, pure Neanderthal lineages disappeared around 40,000 years ago. They weren't wiped out by war or catastrophe. They were absorbed into the growing modern human population through thousands of years of interbreeding. In a sense, Neanderthals never truly went extinct. They became us. Modern genetic research is revealing just how extensive this genetic legacy really is. Neanderthal-derived alleles affect everything from circadian rhythms. Some people have Neanderthal genes that make them natural night owls, to pain sensitivity, from altitude adaptation to the shape of your skull. Some Neanderthal genes are even associated with certain modern health conditions, both beneficial and harmful. Some variants may increase risk for depression and certain autoimmune disorders, while others provide protection against various infections and enhance cognitive abilities. The interbreeding between Neanderthals and modern humans represents one of the most successful genetic exchanges in human evolutionary history. It wasn't a minor evolutionary footnote. It was a major genetic upgrade that helped modern humans survive and thrive as they spread across the globe. What is most beautiful about this story is that it completely rewrites our understanding of what it means to be human. We're not the pure descendants of African ancestors who replaced primitive Europeans. We read the hybrid offspring of an epic love story between two remarkable human species who found each other across the frozen landscapes of Ice Age Europe and decided their future lay together. Every time you look in the mirror, you're seeing the face of this ancient romance. Every time you fight off an infection, solve a complex problem, or survive in harsh conditions, you're benefiting from genetic gifts passed down through thousands of generations of human Neanderthal families. This wasn't just prehistoric dating. It was the genetic fusion that created modern humanity. Chapter 6. The Art of Survival. Long before Picasso picked up a paintbrush, and thousands of years before humans figured out agriculture, Neanderthals were creating the world's oldest known cave art. But calling them artists doesn't capture the full scope of their creative genius. They were innovators who used art, technology, and symbolic thinking to survive in conditions that would challenge modern humans equipped with all our technology. In caves across Spain, scientists have discovered red horizontal and vertical lines forming ladder-like patterns, hand stencils, and geometric designs that date to 65,000 years ago. Full 20,000 years before modern humans arrived in Europe. These weren't accidental marks or random scribbles. They were deliberate symbolic expressions created by beings who understood meaning, beauty, and communication in ways that fundamentally changed how we think about intelligence and consciousness. Picture the scene. A Neanderthal artist ventures deep into a cave where no natural light can penetrate, carrying a carefully prepared torch and pigments they've collected and processed. They select specific locations, the ceilings of low overhangs, impressive stalagmite formations that clearly held special meaning. Then, In flickering firelight, they create images that would survive for tens of thousands of years. The hand stencils are particularly remarkable because they represent something unprecedented in the archaeological record: the deliberate decision to leave a permanent mark saying, "I was here." Creating these required applying pigment to hands and pressing them against cave walls in meaningful locations. This wasn't practical. It was purely symbolic, representing abstract thought and self-awareness that rivals our own. But Neanderthal artistry went far beyond cave paintings. At Bruniquel Cave in southern France, they created something that still baffles archaeologists: mysterious stone structures built from hundreds of intentionally broken stalagmites arranged into large ellipsoid formations deep in areas where no light could penetrate. Building these structures required incredible organization and planning. Neanderthals had to venture into pitch-black cave areas carrying light sources, deliberately break cave formations into specific sizes, then arrange them in complex patterns while maintaining fires that reddened and blackened many of the stones. The structures show evidence of multiple visits and ongoing maintenance over extended periods. No one knows what these structures were for, but they represent a level of abstract thinking and symbolic behavior that was supposedly impossible for anyone except modern humans. Some archaeologists suggest they might have been ritual sites, meeting places, or even early religious structures. Whatever their purpose, they prove that Neanderthals were capable of conceiving and executing complex projects that serve no obvious practical purpose. The artistic evidence extends to personal ornamentation that would make modern fashionistas jealous. Painted seashells found in Spanish caves show that Neanderthals were creating jewelry 115,000 years ago, older than similar ornaments made by early modern humans in Africa. These shells were carefully perforated and colored with red and yellow pigments, creating sophisticated accessories that required both technical skill and aesthetic sensibility. But perhaps the most impressive example of Neanderthal artistry is a 51,000-year-old engraved deer toe bone found in Germany's Unicorn Cave. The bone shows several large grooves carved at precise angles, creating a prominent chevron-like pattern. This bone came from a giant deer that lived much farther north, meaning Neanderthals either traveled vast distances to obtain it or maintained extensive trade networks to acquire materials for their art. The angles of the engraved lines are remarkably regular, ranging from 92.3 to 100.3 degrees, showing the kind of precision that suggests both planning and skill. This wasn't random scratching. This was deliberate geometric design that required understanding of angles, symmetry, and visual composition. Neanderthal color preferences reveal sophisticated aesthetic sensibilities. They were using red ochre and other mineral pigments as far back as 250,000 years ago, sometimes importing these materials from tens of kilometers away. This shows they valued specific colors enough to invest significant time and energy in obtaining them. The pigments weren't just for cave art. Evidence suggests they were also used for body painting, tool decoration, and possibly even clothing design. Neanderthals understood color as a form of communication, identity expression, and aesthetic enhancement. But what really sets Neanderthal art apart is how it integrated with their survival technology. The same cognitive abilities that allowed them to create symbolic art also enabled them to develop sophisticated tools, complex hunting strategies, and innovative food processing techniques. They created the world's first composite tools, using precisely controlled adhesives to attach stone points to wooden handles. The technology required to make these adhesives, heating birch bark to exact temperatures while controlling oxygen flow, demonstrates the same kind of precise technical thinking that went into their artistic creations. Neanderthal rope-making technology shows similar integration of practical and creative thinking. Twisting plant fibers into strong, flexible cordage required understanding tension, fiber properties, and manufacturing techniques. but the finished products were often decorated with pigments or woven into complex patterns that served aesthetic as well as practical purposes. Their artistic sensibilities even influenced their toolmaking. Neanderthal stone tools often show evidence of aesthetic considerations beyond pure functionality. Points are symmetrical in ways that require extra work but create more visually pleasing objects. Some tools show evidence of decorative knapping, stoneworking techniques that create patterns and textures purely for visual effect. The integration of art and technology reached its peak in Neanderthal living spaces. Cave sites show evidence of organized areas for different activities. Tool-making zones surrounded by carefully arranged work areas, cooking hearths positioned for optimal light, and ventilation, sleeping areas located for warmth and protection, and artistic areas where pigments were prepared and applied. This wasn't random cave occupation. This was interior design that considered both practical needs and aesthetic preferences. Neanderthals were creating living spaces that were both functional and beautiful, showing an understanding of environment and comfort that goes far beyond simple survival. Their artistic legacy challenges everything we thought we knew about the development of human consciousness. Traditional theories suggested that symbolic thinking and artistic expression emerged in a creative explosion around 40,000 years ago, coinciding with the arrival of modern humans in Europe. But Neanderthal art predates this supposed explosion by tens of thousands of years, suggesting that the capacity for symbolic thinking and creative expression evolved much earlier in human evolution, possibly in the common ancestor of Neanderthals and modern humans around 500 years ago. This means art isn't uniquely human in the narrow sense. It is uniquely human in the broader sense that includes all our close evolutionary relatives. Neanderthals weren't trying to become like us. They were expressing the same fundamental drives for meaning, beauty, and communication that define consciousness itself. The sophistication of Neanderthal art also suggests that they had complex social structures capable of supporting specialized activities. Creating cave paintings, manufacturing pigments, and building stone structures required time and resources that could only be invested by communities with efficient food procurement and social organization. Recent analysis of cave art sites shows evidence of multiple visits over extended periods, suggesting that Neanderthals returned to specific locations for artistic activities. This indicates cultural traditions passed down through generations, artistic communities that maintained and developed creative practices over thousands of years. When we look at Neanderthal art, we are not seeing primitive attempts at creativity. We are seeing the origins of human artistic expression itself. They weren't our inferior predecessors stumbling toward true art. They were accomplished artists whose creative legacy lives on in our own drive to create meaning through symbols, colors, and forms. They didn't just survive the Ice Age, they made it beautiful. Chapter 7. The Social Networks. While you're struggling to maintain friendships on social media, Neanderthals were running complex social networks that would make modern community organizers jealous. These weren't solitary cave dwellers grunting at each other. They were sophisticated social beings who developed care systems, cultural traditions, and community structures that in many ways surpassed our own. The most powerful evidence of Neanderthal social sophistication comes from how they treated their most vulnerable members. In 2024, researchers identified Tina, a 6-year-old Neanderthal child found in a Spanish cave who had Down syndrome, severe hearing loss, and vertigo. The fact that she survived to age 6 in the harsh conditions of Ice Age Europe proves something remarkable. Her community cared for her out of pure altruism. Think about what this means. In an environment where every calorie mattered and every day was a struggle for survival, Neanderthal communities chose to invest resources, time, and emotional energy in caring for members who couldn't contribute to hunting, gathering, or group defense. This wasn't just compassion. This was a social value system that prioritized community care over individual survival. Tina wasn't an isolated case. The famous Shanidar, one individual shows signs of extensive care for a severely disabled community member. This Neanderthal survived to old age despite having an amputated right arm. Bone infections, vision problems, possible hearing loss, and an abnormal gait that would have made him completely dependent on his group for survival. The level of care required to keep such individuals alive for decades speaks to social structures that were both organized and deeply compassionate. Someone had to share food, provide protection, help with mobility, and offer emotional support. This required community-wide decision-making and resource allocation that demonstrates social thinking of remarkable sophistication. But Neanderthal social networks extended far beyond caring for the disabled. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, archaeologists discovered evidence that Neanderthals repeatedly returned to lay their dead to rest in what appears to be a formal cemetery. This wasn't random body disposal. This was organized death ritual that shows cultural traditions passed down through generations. A 75,000-year-old female Neanderthal discovered at Shanidar had been carefully buried, possibly with flowers and other grave goods. The deliberate nature of these burials suggests not just respect for the dead, but complex beliefs about death, identity, and community continuity that required sophisticated social organization. The Skull Cave burials in Israel reveal even more remarkable social dynamics. 10 individuals were found buried together, each showing different combinations of Neanderthal and modern human traits. This wasn't just a burial ground. It was a multi-generational cemetery used by hybrid families that represented ongoing social relationships between Neanderthal and modern human communities. By designating specific locations as cemeteries, these communities were demonstrating territoriality and social organization that wasn't supposed to emerge until the development of agriculture thousands of years later. They were creating permanent cultural landmarks that served as focal points for community identity and social memory. Genetic analysis reveals the sophisticated social structures underlying Neanderthal communities. Despite living across vast territories from Portugal to Siberia, genetic evidence shows at least 3 distinct regional populations: Western Europe, the Mediterranean coast, and east of the Caucasus, with regular migration and genetic exchange between regions. This pattern suggests organized social networks that maintain contact across thousands of kilometers. Neanderthals were unisolated in small family groups. They were connected in large-scale social systems that facilitated trade, intermarriage, and cultural exchange across continental distances. The evidence for these connections is everywhere once you know how to look for it. Neanderthal sites contain materials that came from hundreds of kilometers away. Specific types of stone for tools, pigments for art, and even decorative shells from distant coastlines. This wasn't accidental. This was organized trade and social exchange that required complex communication and trust networks. Tool technology provides insight into their social learning systems. The Mousterian stone tool tradition associated with Neanderthals shows remarkable consistency across vast territories and time periods, suggesting cultural transmission systems that could maintain technological knowledge across generations and geographic regions. But individual Neanderthal communities also developed local innovations and specializations. Sites in different regions show unique tool styles, artistic traditions, and food processing techniques that suggest local cultural development within broader social networks. This balance between shared knowledge and local innovation demonstrates sophisticated social dynamics. Their living spaces reveal complex social organization within individual communities. Cave sites show evidence of specialized areas for different activities: tool-making zones, food preparation areas, sleeping spaces organized by age and family relationships, and communal areas for group activities. The organization of these spaces suggests social rules about privacy, hierarchy, and resource sharing that required ongoing negotiation and community agreement. This wasn't random cave occupation. This was intentional community planning that considered individual needs within group dynamics. Evidence from multiple sites suggests that both Neanderthal men and women participated in hunting, which contrasts with the sexual division of labor seen in many modern hunter-gatherer societies. This may indicate more egalitarian social structures where roles were determined by individual capability rather than strict gender categories. The care systems for children reveal remarkably advanced social thinking. Neanderthal children had longer dependency periods than most other mammals, requiring extended care and resource investment. This was only possible in communities with sophisticated food sharing and childcare cooperation. Recent analysis of Neanderthal growth patterns suggests they had faster maturation rates than modern humans, but still required years of social learning to master the complex skills needed for survival. This required educational systems where knowledge about tool-making, hunting, food processing, and social behavior was deliberately transmitted from adults to children. The artistic evidence shows they had cultural traditions that were maintained across generations. Cave art sites show evidence of multiple visits over extended periods, with new images added to existing galleries over hundreds or thousands of years. This suggests artistic communities that maintain creative traditions and pass them down through family and social groups. But perhaps most remarkably, Neanderthal social networks were flexible enough to integrate with modern human communities. The extensive genetic evidence for interbreeding shows that these weren't hostile encounters between competing groups. They were social interactions that led to long-term relationships, shared communities, and hybrid families. The integration was so successful that it literally changed the genetic makeup of both species. Modern humans gained valuable Neanderthal genes that improved their survival in European and Asian environments, while Neanderthal populations received genetic diversity that may have helped counter the effects of small population sizes. This level of social integration required sophisticated communication systems, possibly including early forms of language. While we can't know if Neanderthals had fully developed speech, the complexity of their social behaviors suggests communication abilities that went far beyond simple gestures and vocalizations. Their social networks were so effective that they enabled Neanderthals to survive and thrive in some of the harshest environments humans had ever encountered. They maintained stable communities for over 400,000 years, adapting to massive climate changes, ice ages, and ecological disruptions that would challenge modern civilizations. When Neanderthal populations finally disappeared around 40,000 years ago, it wasn't because their social systems failed. It was because they were so successful at integrating with modern human communities that they were ultimately absorbed into the larger population. The legacy of Neanderthal social organization lives on in modern human societies. Our capacity for caring for vulnerable community members, our ability to maintain long-distance social relationships, our drive to create cultural traditions and pass them down through generations. All of these may be enhanced by genetic and cultural inheritance from our Neanderthal relatives. When we look at Neanderthal social networks, we not seeing primitive attempts at community organization. We seeing sophisticated societies that solved many of the same social challenges we face today, often with more compassion and effectiveness than modern communities achieve. They didn't just survive as individuals, they thrived as communities. Chapter 8. Supernatural Survivors. If Neanderthals were characters in a video game, they would be the ultimate hardcore mode survivors with maxed out stats in nearly every category. These weren't just tough, they were supernatural in their ability to thrive in conditions that would send modern humans running for climate-controlled shelters and emergency services. For over 400,000 years, Neanderthals dominated some of the most challenging environments humans had ever encountered. They lived through multiple ice ages, survived massive volcanic eruptions, adapted to radical climate changes, and thrived in landscapes that were basically frozen wastelands for thousands of years at a time. To understand just how hardcore they were, consider this. Neanderthals regularly survived in conditions that would kill unprotected modern humans in hours. Winter temperatures in Ice Age Europe could drop to levels that would freeze exposed flesh in minutes. Yet, Neanderthals were out there hunting woolly mammoths and building families. Their bodies were perfectly engineered for survival in extreme conditions. Those stocky proportions that made them look different from modern humans. That was evolutionary genius. Their shorter limbs and broader torsos minimized surface area exposed to cold, creating biological heat conservation systems that were more effective than most modern winter gear. Their huge nasal passages weren't just for show. They were sophisticated, biological air conditioning systems that could warm and humidify Arctic air before it reached their lungs, preventing the respiratory damage that kills people in extreme cold. Modern Arctic explorers use specialized breathing equipment to achieve what Neanderthals did naturally. But physical adaptations were just the beginning of their survival superiority. Neanderthals developed technology and survival strategies that were thousands of years ahead of their time. They were the first humans to control fire with precision, creating hearths that could maintain specific temperatures for different purposes. Cooking food, making tools, processing materials, and providing warmth during brutal winter months. Recent discoveries show they could maintain fires at exactly 300 degrees Fahrenheit, the kind of temperature control that modern people achieve with digital thermometers. Their fire technology wasn't just about staying warm. Neanderthals used controlled burning to modify their environments, clearing underbrush to improve hunting grounds, driving game toward kill sites, and creating defensive barriers around their communities. They were landscape engineers who used fire as a tool to reshape their world. The complexity of their survival systems is mind-blowing. At Gibraltar sites, archaeologists found evidence that Neanderthals were processing pine nuts, shellfish, seals, dolphins, and over 143 species of birds. This wasn't desperate scavenging. This was sophisticated resource management that required deep ecological knowledge and specialized processing techniques. They knew which plants were safe to eat, which had medicinal properties, and which could be used to make tools and materials. Neanderthal sites contain evidence of plant use for everything from food flavoring to adhesive manufacturing to textile production. They were walking encyclopedias of survival knowledge. But perhaps most impressive was their ability to predict and prepare for seasonal changes that could mean the difference between life and death. Evidence from Grotte du Lazaret shows Neanderthals conducting massive autumn hunting drives, taking down dozens of large animals and processing them for long-term storage before winter set in. This required understanding animal migration patterns, predicting weather changes, coordinating group hunting activities, and managing complex food preservation systems. Get any of these factors wrong, and your entire community dies when the snows come. Neanderthal medical knowledge was remarkably advanced for people who supposedly had no formal education or writing systems. The survival of severely disabled individuals like Shanidar, one, and the Down syndrome child, Tina, proves they had effective medical care systems that could treat major injuries, infections, and chronic conditions. Archaeological evidence suggests they used plants with known medicinal properties, understood wound care and infection prevention, could set broken bones, and had techniques for managing chronic pain and disabilities. They were performing medical procedures that wouldn't be formally developed by modern humans for thousands of years. Their psychological resilience was equally remarkable. Analysis of Neanderthal Injury patterns shows that about 80% of individuals suffered major traumatic injuries during their lifetimes. Yet they survived, healed, and continued contributing to their communities. Modern research on trauma recovery shows that this level of resilience requires strong social support systems and sophisticated coping mechanisms. The seasonal survival challenges were incredible. Neanderthals had to manage resources through annual cycles that included months of near-total darkness, temperatures that could kill exposed humans in minutes, and food scarcity that would challenge modern survival experts with all their gear and knowledge. Winter survival required stockpiled food, weatherproof clothing, reliable heating systems, secure shelter, medical supplies for treating cold-related injuries, and social systems strong enough to handle months of confined living under extreme stress. Neanderthals mastered all of these challenges and made it look routine. But they weren't just surviving, they were thriving. Neanderthal communities maintained artistic traditions, developed new technologies, raised healthy children, and cared for elderly and disabled members even during the harshest conditions. This suggests survival systems that provided not just physical security, but psychological and social. While their adaptation to different environments was remarkable. Neanderthals spread from Portugal to Siberia, adapting their survival strategies to Mediterranean coastlines, northern forests, mountain regions, and Arctic tundra. Each environment required different hunting techniques, food processing methods, shelter construction, and seasonal adaptation strategies. The tools found at different sites show local innovations while maintaining core technologies that worked across multiple environments. This suggests survival knowledge that was both universally applicable and locally adaptable, the hallmark of truly sophisticated survival systems. Perhaps most impressive was their long-term thinking. Neanderthal survival strategies weren't just about getting through the next day or season. They were about maintaining communities and cultural traditions across thousands of generations. They developed sustainable hunting practices, managed resources to avoid overexploitation, and created social systems that could adapt to changing conditions. Genetic evidence shows that despite living in small populations that faced regular environmental challenges, Neanderthals maintained enough genetic diversity to survive for hundreds of thousands of years. This required social systems that managed population genetics, avoided excessive inbreeding, and maintained connections with distant communities. Their survival success enabled them to outlast multiple volcanic winters, ice age cycles, and massive ecological disruptions that wiped out many other species. When the Campanian ignimbrite volcanic eruption devastated large parts of Europe around 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals survived while many other species went extinct. The end of Neanderthal populations around 40,000 years ago wasn't due to survival failure. It was due to integration with modern human populations that ultimately absorbed them genetically. Their survival strategies were so successful that they attracted modern humans who wanted to learn from them and ultimately interbreed with them. Modern survival experts who study Neanderthal techniques are amazed by their sophistication. Ray Mears, one of the world's leading wilderness survival instructors, has said that Neanderthal survival knowledge in many areas exceeded what modern bushcraft specialists can achieve. The survival legacy of Neanderthals lives on in modern human genetics. Many of the Neanderthal genes that survived in our populations are associated with immune function, cold adaptation, high-altitude survival, and other traits that help humans survive in challenging environments. When we look at Neanderthal survival abilities, we're not seeing primitive people barely scraping by. We're seeing master survivors who turned some of the harshest environments on Earth into thriving homelands. They weren't struggling to survive. They were demonstrating that with the right knowledge, technology, and social systems, humans could thrive anywhere. They didn't just live through the Ice Age, they conquered it. Chapter 9. The Technology Revolution. While modern humans were still figuring out basic stone tools, Neanderthals were running what can only be described as prehistoric technology companies. These weren't primitive toolmakers, chipping rocks together. They were innovative engineers who developed technology so advanced that modern researchers are still trying to figure out how they did it. The sophistication of Neanderthal technology becomes clear when you understand the precision required for their manufacturing processes. Recent discoveries in Gibraltar revealed that Neanderthals were operating controlled environment glue factories where they heated birch bark to exactly 300 degrees Fahrenheit to produce complex adhesives for tool making. Think about what this means from an engineering perspective. They had to understand material properties of different tree barks, control temperature within narrow ranges without thermometers, manage oxygen flow to prevent combustion, and time the heating process to achieve optimal chemical reactions. This wasn't accidental discovery. This was sophisticated chemical engineering. The adhesives they produced were used to create the world's first composite tools. Stone points hafted to wooden handles with multi-component binding systems that were stronger and more effective than anything being produced by modern humans at the time. Analysis shows these tools were broadly similar to examples made by early modern humans in Africa, but with a Neanderthal spin that often showed superior engineering solutions. But glue making was just one part of their technological revolution. Neanderthals invented rope and cordage technology, twisting plant fibers into strong, flexible materials that opened up entirely new possibilities for tool creation, clothing manufacture, hunting equipment, and construction projects. Modern experts who have tried to replicate Neanderthal rope-making techniques report that it's a lot harder than most people thought. The process requires understanding fiber selection, tension control, twist ratios, and joining techniques that produce cordage strong enough for demanding applications while remaining flexible enough for complex manipulation. Their stone tool technology reached levels of sophistication that wouldn't be matched for thousands of years. Neanderthals developed the live-low technique, a method of stone knapping that involves preparing a stone core through multiple carefully planned steps before removing a final tool in a single, precise strike. This technique requires three-dimensional thinking, forward planning, and technical skill that approaches modern manufacturing precision. The knapper has to visualize the final tool shape, plan the sequence of preparation strikes, calculate angles and force vectors, and execute the final removal with millimeter precision. One mistake at any step ruins hours of careful preparation. But Neanderthals took stone technology even further, creating specialized tools for different applications. Hunting points designed for specific prey species, hide processing scrapers with optimal edge geometries, bone working tools for manufacturing needles and awls, and composite implements that combine multiple materials for enhanced performance. Their weapon technology was particularly impressive. Analysis of stone points from Neanderthal sites shows impact scars consistent with high-velocity collisions with large prey, proving they were creating spears capable of penetrating mammoth hide and delivering lethal wounds to the largest animals in their environment. The engineering challenges of hunting megafauna with handheld weapons required understanding of leverage, penetration mechanics, point design, shaft construction, and binding systems that could withstand the massive forces generated during impact with huge, struggling animals. Neanderthal clothing technology represented another major technological breakthrough. While modern humans in Africa were still using simple draping and tying techniques, Neanderthals were creating fitted garments using bone needles, sinew thread, and sophisticated tailoring methods. The bone awls found at Neanderthal sites aren't crude piercing tools. They're precisely manufactured sewing, implements with optimized point geometries and ergonomic handles. Creating these tools required understanding bone properties, heat treatment techniques, and tool design principles that wouldn't be formally developed by other human populations for thousands of years. Their textile production went beyond simple hide preparation to include complex processing techniques that produce materials with specific properties: waterproof outer garments, insulating inner layers, flexible joint coverings, and decorative elements that combined function with aesthetic appeal. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Neanderthal technology was their understanding of material science. They knew which types of stone produced the sharpest edges, which woods provided the best tool handles, which animal parts yielded the strongest sinews, and which plants produced the most effective adhesives and pigments. This knowledge wasn't accidental. It represented thousands of generations of systematic experimentation, testing, and refinement. Neanderthal communities maintained technological knowledge bases that rivaled modern research institutions in their depth and practical application. Their fire technology was equally advanced. Beyond basic combustion, Neanderthals understood fire management for different applications: high-temperature flames for tool manufacture, low-temperature cooking fires for food preparation, smoldering fires for smoking and preservation, and precisely controlled burns for materials processing. Recent discoveries show they were using fire not just for immediate needs, but for landscape management, driving game, clearing vegetation, and creating defensive barriers. This represents understanding of fire behavior, environmental effects, and long-term planning that approaches modern wildfire management techniques. The integration of their technologies was remarkable. Neanderthal toolmaking combined stone knapping, woodworking, adhesive production, cordage manufacture, and hide processing into integrated manufacturing systems that produced complex, multi-material implements designed for specific applications. A single Neanderthal spear might incorporate stone points snapped using advanced techniques, wooden shafts selected for specific strength and flexibility properties, bindings made from specially processed plant fibers, and adhesives created through controlled chemical processes. Each component required mastery of different technologies that had to work together perfectly. Their manufacturing quality control was extraordinary. Analysis of Neanderthal tools shows remarkably consistent standards across different sites and time periods, suggesting quality control systems that maintain technological standards across thousands of years and vast geographic distances. This consistency required not just technical knowledge, but educational systems that could transmit complex manufacturing procedures from generation to generation without writing systems or formal schools. Young Neanderthals had to learn through observation, practice, and hands-on training that produced master craftspeople capable of maintaining technological traditions. The innovation rate in Neanderthal technology was impressive. Archaeological sites show evidence of continuous technological development, improved tool designs, new manufacturing techniques, better materials processing methods, and innovative applications of existing technologies to solve new problems. Their ability to adapt technologies to local conditions was remarkable. Neanderthal communities in different environments developed specialized tools and techniques suited to local resources and challenges while maintaining core technological principles that worked across multiple environments. Coastal Neanderthals developed specialized marine resource processing tools. Mountain communities created high-altitude hunting equipment, and forest dwellers perfected woodland survival technologies. Each required local innovation while maintaining technological compatibility with broader Neanderthal communities. Perhaps most impressive was their understanding of technology transfer and knowledge sharing. The presence of similar technologies across vast Neanderthal territories suggests networks for sharing innovations, teaching techniques, and maintaining technological standards that span continental distances. Modern technology companies spend millions on research and development, knowledge management, and global distribution systems. Neanderthals achieved similar results using social networks, apprenticeship systems, and cultural traditions that maintain technological excellence across hundreds of thousands of years without written records or formal institutions. Their technological legacy lives on in modern human societies. Many fundamental technologies we take for granted, composite tools, advanced adhesives, textile production, precision manufacturing, quality control systems were pioneered by Neanderthal engineers working in Ice Age workshops with nothing but raw materials and incredible ingenuity. When we look at Neanderthal technology, we're not seeing primitive attempts at toolmaking. We're seeing sophisticated engineering, solutions that solved complex problems with elegance, efficiency, and remarkable innovation. They weren't struggling with basic survival needs. They were developing technologies that gave them competitive advantages in the most challenging environments on Earth. They didn't just use tools, they revolutionized them. Chapter 10. The Great Vanishing Act around 40,000 years ago. Something unprecedented happened in human evolutionary history. After dominating Europe and Western Asia for over 400,000 years, after surviving multiple ice ages and volcanic winters, after developing sophisticated technologies and complex societies, the Neanderthals began to disappear. But this wasn't the simple story of primitive beings replaced by superior humans that we've been told for decades. The truth is far more complex, controversial, and ultimately more fascinating. The traditional narrative painted Neanderthal extinction as an inevitable consequence of modern human superiority. Advanced humans with better technology, language, and intelligence supposedly outcompeted their primitive cousins in a straightforward case of survival of the fittest. But recent research has shattered this simplistic story and revealed something much more intriguing. Neanderthals didn't fail because they were inferior. They may have disappeared because they were too successful at integrating with modern human populations. The latest genetic research shows that rather than being wiped out, Neanderthals were gradually absorbed into the expanding modern human population through thousands of years of interbreeding. They didn't go extinct in the traditional sense. They became us. But understanding why this happened requires looking at the complex factors that made Neanderthal populations vulnerable. Despite their remarkable adaptations and capabilities, population size was probably the crucial factor. Genetic modeling suggests that Neanderthal populations were much smaller than previously thought, perhaps only 2,400 breeding individuals across their entire range at any given time. Modern humans, by contrast, were part of much larger, more genetically diverse populations spreading out of Africa. Small population size created several cascading problems for Neanderthals. First, it led to reduced genetic diversity and increased inbreeding, which may have reduced their ability to adapt to rapid environmental changes. Second, it made them more vulnerable to local extinctions from disease, climate events, or resource depletion. Third, it limited their ability to maintain long-distance trade networks and cultural exchanges that could have provided technological and social advantages. But population size alone doesn't explain the Neanderthal disappearance, because they had successfully managed small population sizes for hundreds of thousands of years. Something changed around 40,000 years ago that created new pressures their traditional survival strategies couldn't handle. Climate change played a major role. The period of Neanderthal disappearance corresponds with increasing climate instability, including the beginning of the last glacial maximum, a period of intense cold and frequent temperature fluctuations. that began around 29,000 years ago. While Neanderthals were adapted for cold conditions, rapid climate swings may have disrupted the stable ecosystems they depended on. Archaeological evidence shows that around 24,000 years ago, advancing ice sheets converted previously forested areas into open tundra. This environmental shift favored modern humans, who were adapted for long-distance hunting in open environments, while disadvantaging Neanderthals, who were specialized for forest-based ambush hunting. Neanderthals were gradually pushed into refugia, small pockets of suitable habitat in southwestern Europe where they could maintain their traditional lifestyles. But these isolated populations became increasingly vulnerable to local extinctions and genetic bottlenecks. The arrival of modern humans created new competitive pressures that Neanderthal populations may have been unable to handle. It wasn't necessarily direct conflict. Archaeological evidence suggests that modern humans and Neanderthals coexisted peacefully in many areas. But competition for the same resources could have created subtle pressures that gradually reduced Neanderthal population sizes below sustainable levels. Modern humans may have had some technological advantages that became decisive over long periods. While Neanderthal technology was sophisticated, modern humans were developing long-range projectile weapons, more efficient hunting strategies, and possibly more advanced social organization systems that allowed larger group sizes and more extensive trade networks. But the most significant factor may have been demographic. Modern human populations were expanding rapidly as they spread across Europe and Asia, while Neanderthal populations remained stable or declining. Over time, this demographic imbalance made interbreeding more likely to result in genetic absorption rather than balanced exchange. The pattern of genetic inheritance supports this absorption hypothesis. Analysis of ancient DNA shows that while early Neanderthal-modern human hybrids often remained with Neanderthal communities, later hybrids were increasingly likely to integrate into modern human populations. Over thousands of years, this process gradually transferred Neanderthal genes into modern human populations while depleting pure Neanderthal lineages. Recent discoveries have pushed back the timeline of Neanderthal disappearance and revealed that the process was much more gradual and complex than previously thought. Some Neanderthal populations may have survived in Gibraltar until as recently as 28,000 years ago, thousands of years after they had disappeared from most of Europe. This suggests that Neanderthal disappearance wasn't a single extinction event but a long, drawn-out process that occurred at different rates in different locations. Some populations may have maintained distinct Neanderthal characteristics much longer than others, creating a complex mosaic of human populations with varying degrees of Neanderthal ancestry. The discovery of Thorin, a late Neanderthal from southern France, revealed that some Neanderthal populations had been genetically isolated for over 50,000 years before their final disappearance. This isolation may have made them more vulnerable to extinction while also preserving unique genetic lineages that contributed to the diversity of Neanderthal genes in modern human populations. Cultural factors may also have played a role. While Neanderthal technology and social organization were sophisticated, modern humans may have developed more effective systems for maintaining cultural knowledge, coordinating large-scale activities, and adapting to rapidly changing conditions. Some researchers suggest that modern humans had more advanced language capabilities that enabled better coordination, knowledge transfer, and social organization. While Neanderthals clearly had complex communication abilities, modern humans may have had linguistic advantages that became decisive in competitive situations. The more scientists study Neanderthal disappearance, the more complex the picture becomes. Rather than a single cause, multiple interacting factors created a perfect storm that gradually reduced Neanderthal populations below the threshold. needed for long-term survival. Disease may have played a crucial role that we're only beginning to understand. When modern humans migrated into Europe, they brought pathogens that had evolved alongside African and Middle Eastern populations for tens of thousands of years. Neanderthal immune systems, despite their sophistication, may not have been prepared for these new disease challenges. Archaeological evidence suggests that some Neanderthal populations experienced sudden demographic crashes that could be consistent with epidemic diseases. Sites that show continuous occupation for thousands of years suddenly go silent, with no evidence of gradual abandonment, but rather abrupt cessation of activity. The demographic impact could have been devastating. Small populations are particularly vulnerable to disease outbreaks because they lack the genetic diversity needed to ensure that some individuals will survive novel pathogens. A single epidemic could wipe out entire Neanderthal communities, creating gaps in their range that would then fill by expanding modern human populations. Resource competition intensified during periods of climate instability. As environments shifted and animal migration patterns changed, Neanderthals and modern humans found themselves competing for increasingly scarce resources. While both groups were skilled hunters, their different hunting strategies may have created advantages for modern humans in certain environments. Modern humans' development of long-range projectile weapons allowed them to hunt more efficiently while reducing personal risk. They could take down large prey from safer distances and hunt in more open environments where Neanderthal close combat techniques were less effective. This technological advantage may have been small initially, but could have become decisive during periods of resource scarcity. The timing of resource competition was particularly problematic. Climate instability around 40,000 years ago disrupted traditional hunting grounds, just as modern human populations were expanding into Europe. Neanderthals faced the double challenge of adapting to environmental changes while competing with newcomers who had different technological and social advantages. Social organization differences may have been more important than previously recognized. While both Neanderthals and modern humans had complex societies, they may have organized themselves differently in ways that affected their survival prospects. Modern human societies may have been more flexible in their social structures, allowing larger groups to form when beneficial and smaller groups to split off when resources were limited. Neanderthals may have had more rigid social patterns that worked well. Trade networks and resource-sharing systems may have differed between the groups. Modern humans were developing extensive trade relationships that allowed resources to be shared across large distances. Neanderthal networks, while sophisticated, may have been more localized and thus more vulnerable to regional disruptions. Ability to rapidly share technological and cultural innovations may have given modern humans decisive advantages during periods of rapid change. Larger population sizes and more extensive social networks meant that useful innovations could spread quickly through modern human communities while remaining isolated in smaller Neanderthal groups. The genetic evidence for how Neanderthals were absorbed into modern human populations tells a fascinating story of gradual integration rather than sudden replacement. This process occurred differently in different regions and time periods, creating a complex pattern of genetic inheritance that we're still trying to understand. Early interbreeding events around 100,000 to 200,000 years ago produced hybrid offspring that often remained within Neanderthal communities. These early hybrids may have contributed to Neanderthal genetic diversity, but didn't significantly impact modern human populations because the hybrid lineages remained geographically separated. The situation changed dramatically around 50,000 to 60,000 years ago when modern human populations began expanding rapidly into Europe and Asia. During this period, hybrid offspring were increasingly likely to integrate into modern human communities rather than Neanderthal ones. This shift may have been due to demographic factors. Expanding modern human populations offered more opportunities for integration and reproduction, while declining Neanderthal populations became increasingly isolated and less viable as long-term communities. The selective preservation of certain Neanderthal genes in modern populations reveals that this wasn't random genetic mixing, but rather natural selection actively favoring beneficial Neanderthal variants. Genes affecting immune function, cold adaptation, and certain cognitive abilities were preferentially retained because they provided clear survival advantages. Some Neanderthal genes were eliminated from modern populations, possibly because they were harmful in new environments or incompatible with modern human genetic backgrounds. The surviving Neanderthal genes represent a carefully curated selection of the most beneficial genetic innovations from hundreds of thousands of years of Neanderthal evolution. Regional variation in Neanderthal genetic inheritance suggests that absorption occurred at different rates in different locations. European populations show higher levels of Neanderthal ancestry than Asian populations, possibly reflecting longer periods of contact and interbreeding in European refugia. Archaeological evidence suggests that the final Neanderthal populations survived in southwestern Europe, particularly in the Iberian Peninsula, until as recently as 28,000 years ago. These last Neanderthals lived in increasingly isolated pockets, maintaining traditional lifestyles while the world around them was rapidly changing. The Gorham's Cave complex in Gibraltar has yielded some of the youngest Neanderthal remains, showing that small populations persisted in this Mediterranean refuge long after they had disappeared from most of Europe. These final communities may have numbered only dozens or hundreds of individuals. Their survival in these refugia required remarkable adaptability. As forests gave way to open grasslands and traditional prey species migrated or went extinct, these last Neanderthals had to modify their hunting strategies, tool technologies, and social organizations to survive in changing environments. Evidence from these late sites shows continued technological innovation, artistic expression, and complex social behaviors right up until the end. These weren't populations in decline. They were actively adapting and maintaining their cultural traditions even as their numbers dwindled. The final disappearance may have been as much about isolation as extinction. Small, scattered populations may have lost the ability to find mates and maintain viable breeding groups. Without contact with other Neanderthal communities or opportunities for genetic exchange, these last populations may have simply faded away through demographic processes rather than catastrophic events. The transition from the last pure Neanderthal populations to fully integrated modern human communities may have been so gradual that it's impossible to identify a specific endpoint. The Neanderthal legacy continued in hybrid populations that were genetically and culturally influenced by both ancestral groups. But the most remarkable aspect of Neanderthal extinction is that it may not have been extinction at all. If Neanderthal genes make up 1 to 2% of modern non-African genomes, and these genes have been actively preserved by natural selection because they provide survival advantages, then Neanderthals never truly disappeared. They were incorporated into the modern human gene pool that colonized the globe. From this perspective, Neanderthal disappearance represents one of the most successful genetic absorption events in human evolutionary history. Rather than being eliminated by competition, Neanderthals contributed their most valuable genetic innovations to the expanding modern human population that colonized the globe. Modern research is revealing that this genetic contribution was far from random. Many of the Neanderthal genes that survived in modern populations are associated with immune function, cold adaptation, brain development, and other traits that provided clear survival advantages. Modern humans didn't just absorb Neanderthal genes. They selectively preserved the most valuable ones. The implications are profound. If Neanderthals were genetically absorbed rather than replaced, then modern human success isn't just about our own innovations. It's about our ability to integrate the best genetic and cultural innovations from all the human populations we encountered. The story of Neanderthal disappearance is ultimately a story about the power of genetic and cultural integration, rather than being a cautionary tale about the fate of inferior species. It's an inspiring example of how different human populations can combine their strengths to create something greater than the sum of their parts. Neanderthals didn't fail. They transformed into us. Their genes flow through our veins. Their innovations live on in our technologies. And their survival strategies continue to help us thrive in challenging environments around the world. The Great Vanishing Act wasn't a badumbrashana disappearance, it was the ultimate magic trick, where one amazing human species became part of another, creating the hybrid population that conquered the planet. When we look in the mirror, we're seeing the face of this ancient transformation. The Neanderthals didn't vanish, they evolved into us. Chapter 11. Living legends. Right now, as you're reading this, you're carrying the genetic legacy of some of the most remarkable humans who ever lived. If your ancestry traces back to Europe, Asia, or the Americas, approximately 2% of your DNA comes directly from Neanderthals, and those genes are still actively shaping who you are, how you look, how you think, and how well you survive in the modern world. This isn't ancient history locked away in dusty museums. This is living, breathing reality that influences your daily life in ways that would have seemed like science fiction just a few decades ago. The Neanderthal legacy isn't just preserved in archaeological sites. It's preserved in Modern genetic research has revealed that Neanderthal genes aren't random evolutionary leftovers. They've been actively maintained in human populations for tens of thousands of years because they provide real survival advantages that are still relevant today. Natural selection has been carefully curating our Neanderthal inheritance, preserving the most valuable genetic innovations while allowing less useful variants to fade away. Your immune system is one of the most obvious places where Neanderthal genetics shine. Many of the Neanderthal genes that survived in modern populations are associated with immune function, particularly the ability to fight off infectious diseases. When modern humans migrated into Europe and Asia, they encountered pathogens their African-evolved immune systems had never seen. Interbreeding with Neanderthals gave them access to immune system upgrades that have been tested and refined over hundreds of thousands of years of European living. If you've ever fought off a cold or flu particularly effectively, thanked your body's ability to handle bacterial infections, or shown resistance to certain viral diseases, you may be benefiting from genetic gifts your Neanderthal ancestors developed while surviving Ice Age plagues that would have devastated other human populations. Your physical appearance carries Neanderthal signatures too. Some variants of genes affecting hair color, skin pigmentation, and even body shape come from our Neanderthal relatives. If you have red hair, you're carrying a genetic variant that helped Neanderthals adapt to the low-light conditions of Northern Europe. If you have pale skin, some of the genetic variants that created that adaptation may trace back to Neanderthal populations who needed to maximize vitamin D synthesis during long, dark winters. Even your sleeping patterns might reflect Neanderthal influence. Some people carry Neanderthal-derived genetic variants that affect circadian rhythms, making them natural night owls who are more alert and productive during evening hours. This may reflect adaptations that help Neanderthals take advantage of low-light hunting opportunities or stay alert during dangerous nighttime hours. Your brain carries Neanderthal genetic influences too. Some of the preserved Neanderthal genes affect brain development, neuron formation, and cognitive functions. While we're still learning exactly how these genes influence modern human thinking, early research suggests they may affect everything from memory formation to sensory processing to spatial reasoning abilities. If you're particularly good at visualizing three-dimensional objects, remembering detailed visual information, or processing complex spatial relationships, you might be benefiting from cognitive gifts that helped your Neanderthal ancestors navigate complex cave systems, design sophisticated tools, and create the world's first representational art. The influence of Neanderthal genetics on modern human cognition goes far deeper than most people realize. Recent neurogenetic research has identified specific Neanderthal gene variants that affect everything from the size and structure of brain regions to the speed of neural development and the efficiency of neurotransmitter systems. One of the most fascinating discoveries involves genes that control the development of the visual cortex, the part of your brain that processes what you see. Neanderthals have proportionally larger visual processing areas, and some modern humans who carry Neanderthal variants of these genes show enhanced visual memory, better spatial processing, and superior ability to detect subtle visual patterns. Think about what this means in practical terms. If you're the kind of person who never gets lost, who can remember exactly where you left something weeks later, or who notices details that others miss, you might be experiencing the world through brain architecture that was perfected by artists creating the world's first cave paintings in flickering. Fireht. Neanderthal genes also affect the development of the somatosensory cortex, the brain region that processes touch, pressure, and pain sensations. Some people with Neanderthal variants in these genes show altered pain sensitivity, enhanced tactile discrimination, and better integration of sensory information. This makes perfect sense when you consider that Neanderthals needed incredibly precise sensory feedback to create sophisticated tools, work with dangerous materials, and survive in environments where a small mistake could be fatal. The emotional and social processing centers of the brain also show Neanderthal influences. Genes affecting the development of regions involved in empathy, social bonding, and emotional regulation carry Neanderthal signatures in many modern populations. This isn't surprising when you consider the evidence for Neanderthal compassion. Communities that cared for disabled members maintained complex social relationships and developed cultural traditions that persisted across thousands of generations. The immune system legacy from Neanderthals is so significant that it may have been crucial for modern human survival and global expansion. When our ancestors left Africa, they entered environments filled with pathogens that had been evolving alongside Neanderthal populations for hundreds of thousands of years. The HLA, human leukocyte antigen system, which is crucial for immune function, shows some of the strongest evidence of Neanderthal genetic contribution to modern humans. These genes help your immune system distinguish between your own cells and foreign invaders, and many of the most effective variants in European and Asian populations come directly from Neanderthals. But it's not just about fighting off ancient diseases. Neanderthal immune system genes continue to provide advantages in the modern world. Some variants are associated with better responses to vaccines, enhanced resistance to certain bacterial infections, and more effective immune memory that helps you fight off diseases you've encountered before. However, the Neanderthal immune legacy isn't entirely positive. Some variants that were advantageous in Ice Age environments can cause problems in the modern world. Certain Neanderthal immune genes are associated with increased risk of autoimmune disorders, allergies, and inflammatory conditions. These genes may have provided protection against parasites and infections that were common in Neanderthal environments, but can become problematic when those ancient threats no longer exist. This creates a complex picture where your Neanderthal immune inheritance might make you better at fighting off some diseases, while making you more susceptible to others. It's a reminder that evolution doesn't create perfect solutions. It creates trade-offs that work in specific environments. Your body carries the physical signature of Neanderthal genetics in ways that extend far beyond appearance. Neanderthal genes affect bone density, muscle development, joint structure, and even the shape of your rib cage and pelvis. Some people with significant Neanderthal ancestry show enhanced bone mineral density, particularly in weight-bearing bones. This reflects the incredible physical stresses that Neanderthal skeletons had to withstand during their high-impact lifestyle of hunting megafauna and surviving in challenging environments. Muscle fiber composition also shows Neanderthal influences. Some genetic variants affect the ratio of fast-twitch to slow-twitch muscle fibers, potentially giving some people enhanced capacity for explosive strength and power. Direct echoes of the incredible physical capabilities that made Neanderthals such effective ambush hunters. Your metabolism carries Neanderthal signatures too. Genes affecting how your body processes fats, carbohydrates, and proteins show Neanderthal variants that may reflect adaptations to the high-protein, high-fat diets that Neanderthals consumed during Ice Age winters. Some people with Neanderthal metabolic genes show enhanced ability to maintain stable blood sugar levels, better utilization of dietary fats, and improved cold tolerance, all traits that would have been valuable for surviving in harsh northern climates. Your respiratory system may also reflect Neanderthal adaptations. Genes affecting lung capacity, oxygen utilization, and respiratory efficiency carry Neanderthal variants that may help some people perform better at high altitudes or in low oxygen environments. Modern cognitive testing is beginning to reveal specific ways that Neanderthal genetic inheritance affects how people think, learn, and solve problems. While we're still in the early stages of understanding these connections, some fascinating patterns are emerging. People with certain Neanderthal gene variants often show enhanced performance on spatial reasoning tasks, three-dimensional visualization problems, and mechanical comprehension tests. This makes sense when you consider that Neanderthals were master toolmakers who had to understand complex three-dimensional relationships to create sophisticated implements from raw materials. Memory formation also shows Neanderthal influences, particularly episodic memory, the ability to remember specific events, places, and experiences in rich detail. Some people with Neanderthal variants in memory-related genes report unusually vivid recollection of visual details, spatial layouts, and sensory experiences. Pattern recognition abilities may also be enhanced by Neanderthal genetics. Some research suggests that people with certain Neanderthal variants are better at detecting subtle patterns in visual information, recognizing faces, and processing complex spatial relationships. These abilities would have been crucial for Neanderthal hunters who needed to track animals, navigate complex landscapes, and identify potential threats or resources. Attention and focus capabilities show Neanderthal influences too. Some people with Neanderthal variants in attention-related genes demonstrate enhanced ability to maintain concentration for extended periods, resist distraction, and focus intensely on detailed tasks. This reflects the incredible patience and precision required for Neanderthal activities like tool-making, high processing, and artistic creation. The artistic legacy of Neanderthals lives on not just in archaeological sites, but in the creative capabilities of their modern human descendants. People with certain Neanderthal genetic variants often show enhanced artistic abilities, particularly in visual arts, spatial design, and three-dimensional creation. Modern artists, architects, and designers with significant Neanderthal ancestry often report unusual facility with spatial visualization, color sensitivity, and the ability to work intuitively with three-dimensional forms. This may reflect genetic influences from the people who created the world's first cave paintings and three-dimensional art installations. Musical abilities also show potential. Neanderthal influences. Some research suggests that genes affecting auditory processing, rhythm perception, and fine motor control carry Neanderthal variants that may enhance musical performance, particularly in areas requiring precise timing and coordination. The integration of practical and aesthetic considerations that characterize Neanderthal technology continues to influence modern creative work. Many contemporary artists and craftspeople with Neanderthal ancestry report a natural tendency to create objects that are both beautiful and functional, reflecting the Neanderthal approach to toolmaking that emphasized both effectiveness and visual appeal. In some modern human populations, Neanderthal genetic influence is so significant that it affects fundamental aspects of how people live, work, and interact with their environments. These modern Neanderthals often display combinations of traits that directly echo their ancient relatives. Cold tolerance is one of the most obvious examples. People with high concentrations of Neanderthal genes often show remarkable ability to function in cold conditions that would incapacitate others. They may generate more body heat, maintain better circulation in extremities, and show less physiological stress from cold exposure. Physical strength and endurance capabilities also reflect Neanderthal inheritance. Some people with significant Neanderthal ancestry show enhanced capacity for strength-based activities, better recovery from physical stress, and unusual resistance to fatigue during demanding tasks. Pain tolerance varies significantly based on Neanderthal genetic inheritance. Some people with specific Neanderthal variants show altered pain sensitivity that allows them to function effectively, despite injuries or conditions that would be debilitating for others. This reflects the incredible resilience that allowed Neanderthals to survive and continue functioning despite injury rates that would devastate modern populations. Social and emotional characteristics also show Neanderthal influences. People with certain Neanderthal variants often display intense loyalty to family and community groups, strong protective instincts toward vulnerable individuals, and willingness to make personal sacrifices for group welfare, traits that directly echo the evidence for Neanderthal social behavior. We're currently experiencing what could be called a Neanderthal Renaissance as modern science reveals just how remarkable these ancient humans really were. This isn't just academic interest. It's fundamentally changing how we approach modern challenges and opportunities. Urban planners are studying Neanderthal cave organization to design more effective living and working spaces. Their integration of different functional areas, attention to safety and security considerations, and emphasis on community gathering spaces offer insights for creating environments that support both individual well-being and group cohesion. Architects are incorporating Neanderthal principles into sustainable building design, particularly their understanding of thermal management, material properties, and the integration of indoor and outdoor spaces. Some modern Neanderthal-inspired buildings use passive heating and cooling systems, local materials, and flexible spaces that can be adapted for different uses. Medical researchers are studying Neanderthal approaches to trauma treatment, pain management, and community care for insights that can improve modern healthcare delivery. Their apparent success at treating major injuries without modern medical technology offers lessons for emergency medicine, rehabilitation, and care in resource-limited settings. Psychologists are examining Neanderthal evidence for caring for disabled community members to understand optimal approaches to inclusive community design and support systems for vulnerable populations. The fact that Neanderthal communities successfully integrated individuals with significant disabilities suggests social models that could inform modern disability services. The Neanderthal approach to technology development continues to influence modern engineering, and design philosophy. Their emphasis on creating robust, multifunctional, repairable tools that work reliably under extreme conditions is increasingly relevant in a world facing resource constraints and environmental challenges. Modern manufacturers are studying Neanderthal composite tool construction to develop new approaches to materials engineering. The way Neanderthals combined different materials to create tools with properties superior to any single component offers insights for everything from aerospace engineering to consumer product design. Adhesive technology research draws heavily on Neanderthal innovations. Their development of controlled temperature processes for creating complex adhesives from natural materials is inspiring new approaches to sustainable manufacturing and bio-based materials engineering. Survival. Equipment manufacturers study Neanderthal gear design to create products that work reliably in extreme conditions. The Neanderthal emphasis on simplicity, repairability, and multifunctionality influences everything from military equipment to outdoor recreation gear. As humanity faces climate change and environmental challenges, Neanderthal strategies for adapting to rapidly changing conditions are becoming increasingly relevant. Their success at surviving multiple ice ages, volcanic winters, and ecological disruptions offers lessons for modern environmental resilience. Climate adaptation researchers study Neanderthal responses to environmental change to understand how human communities can maintain stability during periods of rapid ecological transition. Their flexibility in hunting strategies, resource utilization, and social organization provides models for community resilience planning. Sustainable resource management draws on Neanderthal approaches to using local materials, maintaining ecological balance, and avoiding overexploitation of resources. Archaeological evidence suggests they maintained sustainable hunting and gathering practices across hundreds of thousands of years. Disaster preparedness planning incorporates Neanderthal strategies for stockpiling resources, maintaining community cohesion during crises, and adapting quickly to changed circumstances. Their survival through catastrophic events like volcanic eruptions offers insights for modern emergency management. Our understanding of Neanderthal contributions to modern humanity is still in its infancy. As DNA analysis techniques improve, as more archaeological sites are excavated, and as we develop better methods for studying the functional effects of genetic variants, we're likely to discover even more ways that our Neanderthal heritage continues to shape human life. Future research may reveal Neanderthal genetic influences on creativity, social cooperation, environmental adaptation, and other traits that will become increasingly important as humanity faces new challenges and opportunities. We may discover that specific cognitive abilities, personality traits, or physical capabilities that we consider uniquely human actually reflect our Neanderthal inheritance. Advanced brain imaging studies combined with genetic analysis are beginning to show how Neanderthal gene variants affect the structure and function of modern human brains. This research may reveal that some of our most valued cognitive abilities, artistic creativity, spatial reasoning, pattern recognition, and problem-solving skills, are enhanced by genetic gifts from our ancient relatives. Personalized medicine is starting to incorporate knowledge of Neanderthal genetic variants into treatment planning. Understanding how Neanderthal genes affect drug metabolism, immune responses, and disease susceptibility could lead to more effective, individualized medical treatments. The recognition that Neanderthals were sophisticated, intelligent, artistic humans is inspiring a broader cultural renaissance that celebrates human diversity and the value of different approaches to solving complex problems. This isn't just scientific interest. It's changing how we think about intelligence, creativity, and human potential. Artists are creating works inspired by Neanderthal cave paintings, exploring themes of human connection across time and the continuity of creative expression. Musicians are composing pieces that incorporate acoustic properties of caves where Neanderthals may have created the first musical expressions. Writers and filmmakers are developing new narratives about human evolution that emphasize cooperation, integration, and mutual learning rather than competition and replacement. These stories reflect our growing understanding that human success comes from diversity and collaboration rather than dominance by any single group. Educational curricula are being revised to present a more accurate and inspiring picture of human evolutionary history, emphasizing the contributions of all human species to our modern success and the ongoing influence of our diverse genetic heritage. For many people, learning about their Neanderthal heritage becomes a deeply personal journey of discovery. Understanding that they carry genes from some of the most remarkable humans who ever lived can be profoundly meaningful and empowering. Genetic testing companies now provide information about individual Neanderthal ancestry, allowing people to discover which specific genetic variants they've inherited and how those variants might affect their traits and capabilities. This personal connection to ancient human relatives can provide new perspectives on individual strengths, challenges, and potential. Some people report that understanding their Neanderthal heritage helps explain personal characteristics they've always wondered about. Unusual cold tolerance, specific cognitive strengths, particular physical capabilities, or distinctive personality traits that seem to run in their families. The knowledge that you carry genetic gifts from master survivors, innovative engineers, and compassionate caregivers can be inspiring and empowering. It connects you to an epic story of human resilience, creativity, and cooperation that spans hundreds of thousands of years. Understanding your Neanderthal heritage isn't just about appreciating the past. It's about recognizing capabilities and responsibilities that extend into the future. If you carry genes from humans who survived ice ages, created the first art, developed sophisticated technologies, and maintained compassionate communities under extreme conditions, what does that mean for how you approach modern challenges? The Neanderthal legacy suggests that human potential extends far beyond what we typically imagine. Their achievements in art, technology, social organization, and environmental adaptation were accomplished without writing systems, formal institutions, or advanced tools. They relied on intelligence, creativity, cooperation, and determination, capabilities that remain as relevant today as they were 50,000 years ago. Their approach to community care, resource management, and environmental adaptation offers models for addressing modern challenges. Their success at maintaining stable societies across vast time periods and geographic ranges suggests strategies for creating sustainable, resilient communities in an uncertain world. Most importantly, the Neanderthal story demonstrates the power of diversity, integration, and mutual learning. Modern human success isn't just about our own innovations. It's about our ability to incorporate the best ideas, genetic variants, and cultural practices from all the human populations we've encountered. When you look in the mirror, you're not just seeing a modern human. You're seeing the living result of an epic evolutionary collaboration between multiple human species. You are the descendant of modern humans who were smart enough to learn from Neanderthals, integrate their innovations, and preserve their most valuable genetic gifts. The Neanderthals didn't disappear. They became immortal. Their genes flow through millions of people around the world. Their innovations continue to influence human technology and society, and their remarkable story of survival, intelligence, and adaptation continues to inspire and inform human development. You don't just carry Neanderthal genes. You carry their legacy forward into the future. Every time you survive harsh conditions, solve complex problems, care for vulnerable community members, or create something beautiful, You're honoring the memory of some of the most remarkable humans who ever lived. The Neanderthals were absolute freaks of nature, and incredibly, part of them lives on in you. Their story isn't over. It continues in your DNA, your capabilities, your choices, and your contributions to the ongoing human adventure. You are their living legacy, and it's up to you to make that legacy worthy of their remarkable heritage. So here we are at the end of our journey through the extraordinary world of the Neanderthals. And if you're anything like me, your mind has been completely blown. Everything we thought we knew about our primitive cousins has been turned upside down and inside out by discoveries that keep getting more remarkable. With each passing year, we started this story asking what made Neanderthals such freaks of nature, and the answer turns out to be absolutely everything. They were stronger than us, had bigger brains, created the world's oldest art, invented technologies we're still trying to understand, survived in conditions that would kill us, and developed social systems that in many ways surpassed our own. But perhaps the most mind-blowing revelation is that they never really disappeared. Right now, their genes are flowing through your veins. Their innovations are embedded in our technology, and their survival strategies continue to help humanity thrive in challenging environments around the world. The traditional story of human evolution as a simple progression from primitive to advanced, from inferior to superior, has been completely shattered. What we're left with is something much more beautiful and complex. A story of different human species who found each other across the frozen landscapes of Ice Age Europe and decided their future lay together. Neanderthals weren't our failed predecessors. They were our evolutionary partners, our genetic donors, our technological innovators, and ultimately, our ancestors. Modern human success isn't just about our own capabilities. It's about our ability to learn from, integrate with, and preserve the best innovations from all the human populations we encountered. The implications are profound. If human success comes from diversity, cooperation, and genetic integration rather than competition and replacement, then our approach to modern challenges should emphasize collaboration over conflict, learning from differences rather than fearing them, and preserving diverse approaches to solving complex problems. As we face unprecedented global challenges, we might do well to channel our inner Neanderthal. They survived for over 400,000 years through multiple ice ages, volcanic winters, and ecological catastrophes, using nothing but ingenuity, cooperation, and remarkable resilience. They proved that with the right knowledge, technology, and social systems, humans can thrive anywhere and overcome anything. The Neanderthals were absolute freaks of nature, and incredibly, we are their living legacy. Their story isn't over. It continues in us, and it's up to us to write the next chapter worthy of their remarkable heritage.